So far, so good. Always fun to be in here with you guys. I do want to give you a quick heads up. If you're in the praying for miracles kind of space, the chiller has gone out, and so the sanctuary is warm to quite warm this morning. The repairman has been called. He's on the way. Keeping our fingers crossed, but it's very likely it's going to be quite warm. So it's going to be a jackets off and shirt sleeves rolled up on the chancel kind of morning. So there you go. Just giving you the heads up. Do with that information what you will. Yes. I want to start by showing you a film clip real quick. It's probably a movie you haven't seen, but maybe you have. But we're going to jump into the middle of it. I want you to just observe the scene, see what's going on, and then we'll debrief a bit about it.
Tom walked to her apartment, intoxicated by the promise of the evening. He believed that this time his expectations would align with reality.
Good, how are you?
Good.
I am.
So nice. Thank you. You should have. That's so nice. Thanks so much. I'm excited to read it.
So Tom, what is it that you do?
I write greeting cards.
Tom could be a really great architect if he wanted to be. That's unusual. I mean, what made you go from one to the other?
I guess I just figured, why make something disposable like a building when you can make something that lasts forever, like a greeting card. What?
Alright, so what's going on in this scene here? What's the narrative telling us? What's going on there? What do you observe?
False expectations.
False expectations, yeah. Expectation. It started off with the narrator saying this time Tom hoped that his expectations would match up with reality. Is that what happened? Not so much, right? So Tom had this experience of expecting one thing to happen and the other is what happens. So expectations versus reality. My hunch is we've all been in situations, maybe not exactly like Tom, but some type of situation where our expectations were one thing and then the reality became something else. So let's just start there. You don't have to necessarily share your experience if you don't want to, but how does that make you feel? What are the emotions connected to that? What does that do to you psychologically or whatever else? Whenever expectations and reality seem to not align, what does that do to you? Frustration. All right. Why?
Because you're expecting something and it's not playing out like you thought in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You had planned for something.
Yes.
And it went awry.
Okay. Somebody else.
It affects your self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
You go back to your house or your apartment and start saying, well, what's wrong with me?
Okay. Yeah. So all of a sudden it raises lots of questions, maybe in your own head about yourself and situation, or who got this wrong? Like was I wrong to expect this, or did somebody out to get me? Somebody else. What happens whenever your expectations and your reality don't line up?
You may resolve to
you may result to lower your expectations. Okay?
Yeah, but the narration started with this time.
Which means that there were other times. Yeah.
Which means like it never happened.
Yeah. So this time, Tom hoped for the expectation. So clearly he had already had some moments, remember, where they didn't. But he kept building it up and thinking maybe, yeah. So expectations versus reality. It's a disorienting kind of experience to be found in, right? And it can cover, any number of things. It can be really big things. It can be really small things, right? It could be, as my Instagram feed is now reminding me that college football season is going to be here soon, right? So every season ends up, you start with these big expectations, and more often than not, only one team gets to be champion at the end. So more often than not, your expectation and your reality somehow gap. So it's everything from as minor and silly as our rooting interests to maybe, hopes for our careers or for our kids or for any other kind of, it covers a gamut, right? So expectations and reality, there's this thing we have to keep in balance. So with that in mind, I want us to jump into the Old Testament today and look at the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Originally they were one book, Ezra and Nehemiah. At some point along the way we decided to split them up. But it's basically one story that's being told, one narrative. And it's going to focus on three different characters that we're going to look at this morning briefly: Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Now, why Zerubbabel got left out of the title, I'm not really sure. But Ezra and Nehemiah get named. Zerubbabel's expectation versus reality. Zerubbabel's like, hello, and he's the first one we're going to talk about. So Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel. And so to give you a little context, this is what we're talking about here. The time frame that we're going to get into is going to be post-Babylonian exile, all right, coming out of it, right? So 586, the Babylonians move into Judah and they sack the temple. This is the second time that the nation has been sort of decimated. The Assyrians had come in previously. Now the Babylonians come in. They take off all the educated and the higher class off into Babylon. This is known as the exile, significant hinge point in the history of the Israelites, right? And so they're taken off into captivity. The fall of Jerusalem is recorded in 2 Kings. You can go read all the narrative there. And they're sent off in 586 by the Babylonians. Then in 538, the Persians become the next. We're sort of in this revolving empires period, right? So it was the Assyrians, and then it's the Babylonians, and then it's going to be the Persians, and then it's going to be the Greeks, and then it's going to be the Romans. So it just sort of kind of keeps yada yada yada. So the Persians come in, and they have a different way of dealing with their conquered folk. So they're going to come in, and King Cyrus is going to issue this decree that's going to basically tell the people they're going to get to go home. All right. So what does that mean for those who have been stuck in captivity for so long? So while they've been there have been guys like Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Zechariah who are known as the exilic prophets, and they have been trying to keep everybody's spirits up while they've been in captivity, right? So think about if you're in captivity, you've been living on this idea that you are God's chosen people. You have this Abrahamic covenant that has defined who you are, and we're supposed to be God's chosen people. And then the Babylonians have now sacked Jerusalem. The temple has been destroyed, and we have been taken away, and everything that we thought we knew about ourselves is gone. And they had all the pre-exilic prophets were sort of warning them that this was on the way, this was coming, this was a possibility. They ignored it largely, and then it happens, and then you've got these three guys who are coming in to try to keep everybody together a bit while they're in captivity. So what is significant about the temple being destroyed? Why was that such a monumental thing for these people? Do you remember? What's the significance of the temple?
It's where God's presence
It's
was.
God's house, right? Like this is where God resided among the people. So you got the Holy of Holies, the whole bit, right? And so the way they structured their entire way of life was around the idea that God is residing in this temple, which is in the center of everything, and everything sort of concentrically moves out from there. So when the temple is destroyed, God's presence is literally removed from the people, and they are alone and lost. And they are left with these giant questions of what happened. We thought God was on our side. So these folk are coming in trying to kind of keep them going a little bit. So they are told things like this. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare and not to harm you, to give you a future with a hope. We've all heard this before, probably crocheted on a pillow, or maybe, on a plate, like a Cracker Barrel, trying to make you feel really good about stuff. I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. So they've got this message of hope that Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Zechariah are giving them. Like, do not give up. This is not the end. Now, they also remind them that only when Babylon's 70 years are completed will this happen. It's like, you got to stay here for a minute, but this is not the end. There will be more. So what happens? Expectations begin to rise about what their future is going to look like. So when 538 comes around and Cyrus the Great rolls in and says, you guys get to go home now. I'm going to start sending you all home. All these prophetic hopes began to manifest, right? So they have this idea of this future messianic king that the prophets have been telling them about. That God's presence in a new temple is going to happen. They're going to rebuild. God's kingdom over the nations. And finally, this fulfillment of this promise to Abraham is going to happen. And so their expectations are sky high as they get to go back home. So what we find is things don't exactly work out the way they think they're going to. Expectations versus reality. So what happens is there's this sort of circular narrative that happens throughout the Ezra and Nehemiah narrative, where a Persian king is going to be the way it's told is moved by God to appoint a leader and to send them back to Jerusalem to kind of get things going again. That leader is going to face opposition to whatever it is that they're doing, and then it's going to end with this weird anticlimax at the end where the hopes and the expectations don't exactly match up. So we're going to see how that plays out. So the first guy to go back is Zerubbabel. So Zerubbabel is sent back, and his job is to go back and rebuild the temple. Pretty significant moment that needs to happen. So he goes back, rebuilds the temple. There's lots of cheering and lots of happiness and lots of good stuff. However, there are elders who remember the first temple, and it doesn't quite have the feel that the first one did, right? Because they remember these stories from their past when the temple was built and God's presence came swooping in and fire and flame, and that doesn't happen. They built a building, and this group's like, yay, and the other group's like, not quite exactly what we thought it was going to do.
Well, it was
smaller. What's that? It was smaller. There was none of the flame and the fire, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't quite what they had in mind. So they're a little disappointed because they remember the glory of the former temple. The other thing that happens is they're living with this promise that in the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest. They had many peoples will stream to it. There's this idea that the temple is going to somehow unify all the people, and they're all going to come together under God's reign. This is going to be the beginning of that thing that's going to happen. And the reality is there's some arguing and there's some fighting, and there's some folks who actually never went into captivity. Like they left some people there, and so they've just been hanging out for a long time. And all of a sudden these other people show back up and they're, well, we want to be part of this too. This sounds great. And Zerubbabel has a big old fit and says, no. This is our thing. This is our temple. You have no part in this. And so they're like, we've been waiting for something to happen. And so this idea that the temple is going to restore glory and it's going to unify all the people, and it doesn't quite happen. And the story sort of ends with this sort of womp kind of moment. So Ezra is the next person to come along. Ezra is an expert in the law, and Ezra looks around. He gets sent back to kind of re-get the following of the Torah, the following of the law. This is what their entire society is built around. And so Ezra goes back to try to teach the people the law and say, this is the way we're going to live. And it hasn't happened in quite a long time, right? They've been off in exile. And so Ezra comes back, and what's happened is, as the people have begun to resettle, they're intermarrying with other people who kind of moved in. Like I said, it's been 70 years, so other people have set up camp. And so they're starting to hang out with them, and Ezra's having all these reminders of, you go back and read in the old, farther back in the Old Testament about do not mix with the Canaanites and do not intermarry and all this stuff. And Ezra's like, oh, this is bad. And so he's like, these people are just as bad as the Canaanites were. And so as they're getting married and settling down and having families, he institutes this weird divorce decree and tells everybody you can't have those relationships. You have to divorce your people. And if they don't want to get divorced and leave these other people behind, then guess what? You have no part in Israel. And so it's sort of the same cycle that happens with Zerubbabel. High hopes, and we're going to go back, we're going to reestablish all the cultural stuff. Doesn't really happen the way he wants to, and Ezra ends up throwing a fit. Next is Nehemiah. Nehemiah's job is to go back and rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. Because what's happened is the wall was destroyed a long time ago. They're back there. They've rebuilt the temple. They're trying to reestablish the society and the culture, but they're open to attacks and stuff, so they need some protection. So Nehemiah's job is to go back, rebuild this wall. That will give us the protection we need, and it will keep everybody out. And so this is his job. But again, there's other people who have been living there now, and they're like, why are you building a wall in my backyard? Like, this seems odd. And so again, you've got this idea that when Jerusalem was rebuilt and the temple reopened, this is going to be the place where all of God's people come together and have unity and yada, 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 yada. And now Nehemiah is there trying to build a wall to keep certain people out, keep certain people in. And guess what he says? You have no part in Jerusalem. This is not for you. This is for us. And so again, all these expectations about the glory and the unity and all stuff's going to happen, none of it seems to be working out exactly right. Ezra and Nehemiah finally team up. Like, we need to preach a big old revival. So they preach revival. It's the Festival of Booths, I think. It's one of their big festival days. They get everybody together, and everybody's like, you know what, y'all are right. We're going to recommit to following the Torah. We're going to recommit to following the law. We're going to live right. And everything looks like it's going to go well until Nehemiah was walking around one day checking things out, and it turns out the temple is now being neglected because all the people who are supposed to be priests haven't really been trained right, so they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So the temple is sort of falling into disrepair already. The Sabbath is already being dishonored. They're working on the Sabbath. They're trading. They're doing things. Within the site of the Jerusalem's walls, they set up tents for marketing and all this kind of stuff. So all the stuff that they're supposed to be doing, they're not really doing it. They're not following the law. Nehemiah gets super duper frustrated and starts going around and like he's beating people up and smacking people and pulling hair out and just like having a mad fit. And it ends with him basically offering up this prayer that essentially is like, I tried. They won't listen. I got nothing. And this is the end, narratively speaking, of the Old Testament. This is where we are left. So, the Bible's not set up in a chronological order, right? So like the narrative part of Ezra and Nehemiah is chronologically sort of where the Old Testament ends. So it ends us with this moment of frustration of we thought it was going to be this, and it doesn't quite feel that way, right? So within 100 years after they've returned from exile, this whole narrative is stretched out over a bit of time. They've left Babylon. They've had all these prophetic hopes for the New Jerusalem, what that's going to mean, and they end up in a situation that feels very similar to what they had felt like before, where there's poverty, there's injustice, there's corruption. It just hasn't had the feel they thought it was going to have. And so what begins with hope ends with a series of disappointment, and the book ends with where it seems like the Old Testament has been leading us all along, right? Where over and over again we've heard from the other prophets, even before the exile, where the prophets were coming, like people like Micah, who were saying to the people, yeah, you think you're doing the right things, but that's not what God's after, right? God is not interested in your ceremony, and what God wants is a new heart. And they just can't ever quite seem to learn the lesson and figure out what it is, because they put all their expectations in what? Well, if we can just get back and get the temple rebuilt, everything will be fine. Or if we can just get people to start following the law again, and we can get culture and society moving in the right direction, then everything will be fine. Or if we can just get a wall built and protect us, keep us in, keep them out, everything will be fine. And over again, it doesn't quite meet the expectations. They are left disappointed in some kind of way afterwards. So over and over again, what we've got is this idea of unmet expectations. We think it's going to be this, but then we get there and it doesn't quite feel the way we wanted it to. All right, so I want us to watch one more clip. This is an interview with a guy named Billy Corrigan, who you may or may not know, but he is the lead singer of a band called Smashing Pumpkins, which were really big in the mid to late 90s. And he is an interview he did with Bill Maher on his podcast, talking around some of the similar ideas. So let's listen to see what Billy has to say.
I had $1 million by the time I was 24 years old, okay? A year before that, I was making $12,000 a year working at a record store, and I was broke, okay? So I'm we grew up in a time where millionaire, and these days millionaire doesn't mean as much, but the word millionaire still meant something in my brain when I was 24 years old. So I have $1 million when I'm 24 years old. By the time I'm 26 on MTV, Platinum Records,
right,
Saturday Night Live, cover Rolling Stone. I basically did, by my mid-20s, like most of the checklist.
All the boxes,
okay.
Yes.
And I never felt this sense of satisfaction about it. And I couldn't quite understand why, because everybody around me is like, this is incredible. And I was like, it is and it isn't. Okay, so to answer your question, the problem with all of it is it's transactional. Because no matter how many hit songs you write, it's always, what about the next one?
Yeah.
No matter how many records you're sold, there's always somebody who's going to sell more records than you. No matter how good you are, there's always somebody telling you, writing online, that you're the worst thing that ever happened. There was always like an asterisk or a qualifier, and I mean, even my band at times was transactional with me. I mean, I would write these massive songs, and they were kind of like, they didn't give it. It was weird.
Why?
Well, that gets into band psychology, and we could talk about it if you want. But just to finish the little spiel. Only unconditional love in some facet of your life gives you the proper perspective to appreciate what is great about transactional things, but allows you to see them for what they are, which is transactional. There's no Valhalla at the top of Rock Mountain. There isn't. And I've been there multiple times.
Right.
So when I stand in front of 65,000 people, in my hierarchical mind, my family is still above that.
Right, sure.
I tell my kids all the time, and they're still little kids, and hopefully it'll endure in their brain. I tell them, because they'll come see me play. They'll come on stage with me. I mean, we pulled up to where the Mets play in New York, and my daughter goes, how many people am I going to dance in front of today? And I said, well, 41,000. She goes, okay. And then an hour later, she's on stage with me dancing in front of 40,000 people. They're having these immense peak experiences. But I tell them over and over again, no matter what you see Daddy do, no matter what you hear about Daddy, good or bad, you're more important than that. You are so much more important than that to me. I would trade all of this for you. Only unconditional love sort of clarifies what's great and not great about it.
All right, so what did you hear?
So before everybody does the what do you hear, since it's the Open Championship final today, Scotty Scheffler a year ago said almost that exact thing in a press conference
Yeah.
with respect to golf.
Mhm.
And golf world went crazy.
Yeah.
But he said, you know, I win a championship, I celebrate for 5 minutes, and then people start talking about, okay, what's the next mountain to climb?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Something else, what did you hear in that? What did you connect with?
I thought it was interesting that he said, when you understand unconditional love, you can appreciate the transactional.
Yeah.
Which it would have, I was expecting him to say, transactional is just it means nothing.
Yeah. But that's not where he goes exactly, right? Yeah. I think that's a good balance to have, right? He's not talking that the other stuff doesn't matter or isn't important or isn't good or isn't valuable or isn't anything. It's just not everything, right?
He's shrinking the transactional to a smaller piece of his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Becomes a smaller piece rather than what you build the entirety of it around.
It's a matching of realism and expectation.
Okay. Yeah, let's land there a little bit about it. So we started with this idea there's a gap often that can exist between what our expectations might be and what reality actually deals us. And we talked about all the ways that can make us feel disoriented or sad or lost or confused or angry or, you know, whatever descriptor you want to put on it. So how has any of what we've talked about so far helped us know how to bridge that gap maybe between expectations and reality? Because like Ed pointed out, I don't think what Billy Corgan is saying is that expectations are bad to have. I mean, he wanted to be the biggest band in the world, and they got there for a while. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that, provided, I think what we heard, provided that isn't the only thing you're counting on, or you realize that it's not ultimately what's going to give you all the meaning in life, right? So, what else did you hear that helps us figure out how to bridge the gap between unmet expectation or the expectation and reality that happens sometimes?
Darren?
Yes.
A statistic that sticks in my head, has for years.
that's helpful, I think, for this is in polling of American workers, 70% of American workers say they are an above average worker. Think about that. Right? That tells you that a large component of our culture is delusional about themselves, right? They think one thing, the reality is something else. Those statistics can't be true, right?
Right.
It just can't be. And a lot of times, people's expectations have to do with they're really bad at reading what is actually happening. That first clip you showed, I mean, this gal has not really ever been interested.
Right.
He's her friend, and that's what it is, and she's, you know, getting engaged to another dude. And he's got a completely totally different narrative going on in his head because he's bad at reading what's going on in his own life. He's terrible at it. And that could be a world condition. I know it's an American condition. So I would start with that, right?
Okay.
Which is when you just said what you said, start with you, because your expectations might not be realistic for what reality actually is.
Good.
I think that's going on today in this country. I mean, if you look at, we're all outraged about what's going on because we think we are better than everybody else.
Okay.
And I've said it before, I talk to my friends in Europe, they don't think we're better than anybody else. I think that also, I think that also hits us when we have these expectations. What I think about is the expectation that everything, this is America, everything's gonna turn out right. And I'm not sure that's
Yeah.
kind of wonder.
I was thinking that the Hebrews are writing a story that explains their journey with God and the geography, right? So there's a geography conversation and there's this relationship with divinity and this whole idea of some promises. And I think that, I've been working through this idea of Old Testament, New Testament connections. I think we were stimulated by Katie, was it Katie?
Katie.
Yeah, the other day, last few weeks about it, and so I've been pondering it. And so it's this pondering of this story, I think, when I come here, I'm like, okay, what do my buddies, the people I've been hanging with for 10 years or how many years, think about God? Because that's really what we're here. It's really what. So the time is so precious. So thank you. And so when I think about this, it's like there's a plumb line in all of our brains around ideal. Like what is me loving God? What should that look like? Well, I explore the Bible and think about it, pray about it, and sort it, and then I try to plumb up against that standard that I've created in my mind. And you've got a different one, we all have different ones, right? And I think that's when I read this, when I hear you tell me this story, which I didn't know, so thank you. I'm like, that's truly remarkable that a group of people created the story and wrote it down about their journey in relationship with God, and it got incorporated into a book that we get to read. And I think if it has divinity in it, if it has transcendence in the words, it's going to, for me, it was like, well, it's telling me that there is an ability for human beings who are going through difficult things to connect and think about divinity. And so it proves what I heard in the New Testament that it is observable. Well, if we're thinking about divinity, the question really is, for me, it was like, well, how often am I doing that? How often is my ideal of how I think about the world, what I'm loyal to, the things that I'm loyal to, lining up with what I understand about God? And I find myself, as you're saying, Al, deviating from my understanding of myself, right? And the more I look, right, if I look too far backwards, I'm going to have a pretty low view of me because of my 50-year journey of being an adult has not always been perfect or aligned with that ideal. And I like that. I think that's a good message coming out of the Old Testament and going into the New Testament for this kind of next prophet, Jesus.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to say something very different about hierarchy. And I thought the guy really nailed it on the word hierarchy that you asked the question.
Yeah.
And he is tapped into the fact that he has a hierarchical view that's running all the time about whether God's ideal, what's your ideal of God versus my ideal of God. We're running a hierarchy on that. And I think that's something we should glean from the message. So I'm standing up in the back, sir.
That's all good, all good. So I think Jim's teed us up well, right? So like I said, this is sort of the end of the Old Testament. It leaves us with this sort of ellipsis, this ... moment, right? Now as Christians, we have this New Testament that we then turn to, right? And so let's talk a little bit about how leaving us with this sort of, like I said, ... how does that sort of tee up what we then find in the New Testament? How does the New Testament help us to answer sort of where we're left with the Old Testament?
I actually want to throw something a wrench in here.
Please,
It's
I
a
love
book
wrenches.
that wasn't in the canon.
Okay.
The Gospel of Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the Gospel of Thomas, there's this wonderful teaching in which Jesus is recorded as saying, the kingdom will not come by expectation. The kingdom is already, kingdom of heaven is already on earth.
Yes.
And we do not see it. How do we open our eyes? Well, it's exactly what Corbin was saying. It's two ways. It's the experience of unconditional love, which then transforms into what he said, the expression of unconditional love. He only talked about being changed by giving that unconditional love to others.
Yeah.
I have to think with the New Testament message that's incumbent upon having experienced it oneself, or at least maybe in combination.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, Jesus, I think, is saying, and I think it's in the Old Testament too, the Hebrew Bible. He's saying, forget your expectations. It's God's expectations you need to look at first.
Okay.
And then the other things that you want are less than that.
Yeah. So I think what a lot of it comes down to, what we experience from the story with Ezra and Nehemiah, what you hear from the video at the beginning with poor Tom, and then with the one at the end with I'm blanking on the guy, Billy Corgan. Thank you. Over and over again, you've got people counting on the wrong things that they think are going to bring them whatever it is that they're looking for, right? So in the beginning, Tom is like, if I can just get this girl to feel the same way about me that I feel about her, then my life is going to be complete. Or with the Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel, if we can just get the temple built, if we can just get the culture going, if we can just get the wall built, then everything's going to be fine. With Billy Corgan, if I can just sell enough records, if I can just do enough, then I'll be able to have a thing. And so then it's, then where do we find ourselves in that story? How have we played out those same narratives over and over again? If I can just, achieve a certain level at in your company, or in your business, or financially, or whatever, if I can just get my kids to do this, that, or the other, then I'll be able to find that. If I can just. As a church, we just celebrated our 75th anniversary, right? And we all pat ourselves on the back, talk about how great it is to be us, and with good reason, a lot to be proud of. But as we begin to kind of figure out, well, who are we going to be for the next 75 years? What does that look like? I think this is a really important kind of thing to be asking ourselves. Like, what are we going to set before ourselves to determine what success looks like for Wilshire Baptist Church for the next heck, 5 years, much less 75, right? Like, what is it that we're going for? And so we got to make sure that we're not counting on, like, if we could just get our budget up, you know, another little bit, maybe that'll be, if we can just get a few more people to start coming, if we can just have another set of programs, if we can just have another, whatever it is, and it's all these things that are all good, right? There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff.
Coolers and elevators.
You know, elevators work, a chiller that won't break, right? If we can just get that darn chiller to actually cool every Sunday, we're taking off, right? And over and over and over again, the lesson that we learn is that if we're putting our hopes and expectations on the wrong things, not wrong because they are wrong, or because they are bad, or because they are less than in some way. They are all honorable, good things. Not always, but they can be very honorable and good things that we are wanting for ourselves. The problem comes in whenever you put too much weight on those things to be what is going to give you meaning and purpose in your life. And over again, the lesson that we get from the scriptures is that that's not the way it works. That's why when Jesus does come along, he likes to say stuff like, you have heard it said this, but I tell you this. That what he's talking about there is there's expectations and there's reality. You have heard it said these types of things, but now I'm telling you it's this, right? When he does the Beatitudes don't make sense because of the way, well, the expectation is, you know, we want to be these kind of people because this is what it means to be blessed. And Jesus comes along and says, well, actually, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are you when people revile you and hate you and say all kind of nasty things about you. And you're like, that's not, my expectation is that if I can get people to talk well about me and think well about me and treat me well, then I will have success in life. And Jesus wants to kind of flip all this stuff over again, right? And so it's this idea that as we transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament, we're left with this anticlimactic ending, right? Like we've journeyed from literally the creation through to this point, and all along we've been trying to figure out what does it mean to live in connection with God and with each other, and what does this look like, and how do we do it? And they've gotten to this point, they still haven't quite, it hasn't popped in the right kind of way yet. And so then Jesus comes along because he needs, again, for us to kind of re-examine what our expectations of what it means to be in a relationship with God and what it means to be in a relationship with each other. And so part of the reason Jesus comes along is like, we haven't figured this out yet. There's still this misunderstanding of what it is God's looking for. So God's like, guess what? I'll just show up and I'll walk around and I'll show you what you're supposed to do. And then we still don't get it right all the time.
Darren, when I think about this celebration that we just experienced,
yeah,
and what did we celebrate? You know, we didn't celebrate things that this church would have necessarily been thinking about, expecting 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
We celebrated the times that we have listened to the new things that God wants to do.
Yeah.
Look at the Pathways to Ministry, the baptism thing we went to about 15 years ago, LGBTQ, so forth.
Yeah.
The new things that God wants to do through us. And I think that that's a lesson for us in our personal walk with God as well.
100%.
To listen to those things.
Yeah.
I take it even a step, sort of that, but I think we take the New Testament much the same way. We read into it what we want to believe.
Sure.
What we see our feet. And I think we have a lot of expectations that maybe we're going to be surprised about.
Oh, there's a whole another set of lessons about how we've taken what Jesus was trying to tell us, and then we've just to play it out for half a minute because we're out of time. You know, the entire let's pick one of it, like the entire idea of like a prosperity gospel, right? Like that's a complete inversion of expectation and reality versus what Jesus was talking about, right? So now so Jesus comes on to try to help us figure out the expectation versus reality thing. And what do? We take it and we figure out how to monetize it and corporatize it to where all of a sudden it's like, well, if I just follow this guy, then I'm going to have all the success in the world. And you're like, you've totally missed the point again. So we do this, like, look, we're dumb. Like we have, our ignorant maybe is a better way to think. We don't think through all the implications of it, right? But it's the same story over and over and over and over again about how we as humans continue to struggle with this thing right here. that we're counting on the wrong things that are gonna bring us meaning, purpose, fulfillment in life. And, you know, I think over and over again, Jesus is trying to tell us it's not those things that matter.
And we have to be careful such that we don't interpret it thinking that Jesus is sort of a progressive Christian who likes some traditional worship.
Right. Okay.
I was just gonna say that, lest we think that this Billy Corgan has it all figured out, I was just looking him up.
Oh, yeah.
He was married for 5 years,
Mhm.
and then he took 25 years off and was dating a who's who of
Sure he was.
musicians and artists and stuff like that. Now he's been married 3 years. So like all of us on different topics, he's still trying to figure things
Yeah, yeah.
Well, his big album was Melancholy and Infinite Sadness.
That's right. Melancholy.
That's his opus.
That's right.
Okay.
Great record.
It is, it's true.
Because we fall down, we get up again, nothing's ever gonna get me down.
Yeah.
That is a rock star. That was his hit song.
The temples of the mind.
I don't know, maybe.
It's good to come in and talk about this all the time, because I know in my head that contentment is what I should be
Mhm.
after as opposed to achievement.
Yeah.
And for 40 or 50 adult years, and I'm still working, and I catch myself being so discontented because I haven't achieved
Yeah.
the thing that I'm trying to achieve, and I know better. And so it's helpful to come in here and just
Yeah.
continue to get the perspective reset, and I work myself into a lather and then walk out of a room and think, what the heck am I doing? I'm never gonna learn this lesson.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So like we talk about this is all of our experience, right? So I taught this exact same lesson maybe 3 weeks ago in the college class. Very different group of people having very different experience of life, different stage, everything. But they all connected with it in the same kind of way. They're like, oh yeah, because what are they doing right now? They're trying to we've got to have the right major to get the right job, to get the right, they're here with it.
Yeah.
And some of us are farther down dealing with it, but it's still, it's the thing we've all got to try to figure out.
Hey, Darren.
Is what does that mean? Yeah.
Quickly,
Yeah.
I will tell you that I have found in my own life that watching other created things that are not human and how they interact with the world we live in helps me to define what's sacred.
Yeah.
And all I mean by that is, there's fish in my pond and I watch them. There's birds in my trees and I listen to them. And I have this interaction with my dogs that is incredibly special. Okay, all these things have the living imprint of God in them. And what I would say is, out of those living creatures that I've just mentioned, the only one that seems to experience angst and discontentment is me.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll leave you with this. When my dogs are outside, and one of my dogs, who is my dog, is communicating with me, and I can tell by the way he's barking what he wants. He wants me outside. He doesn't, this is the bark of, I don't want inside, I want you outside.
Yeah.
And when I go outside and I'm with my dogs, I have figured out what they want is me to sit in that chair and just be in community with them while they put a ball in their mouth and chew on it.
Yeah.
They don't want me to pet them, they just want me to be.
Yeah.
And when that happens for me, I look at that and say, so they are helping me understand the world God has put me in. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Consider the lilies of the field. Consider the birds of the air. Consider the dogs in our backyard. Consider all these other things, all these lower forms that have got a lot to teach us, right? So, great.
Different.
Except for the raccoon.
Except for the raccoon. Watch out for the raccoons. Those suckers are up to no good.
Always.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
And I'm next week too.